Welcome to the 2024 North Carolina Human Trafficking Prevention Conference. I'm Chris Jones, your MC. Y'all can put your hands together for me. Come on. And I hope all of you are as excited as I am to be here. This is something we really need to tackle in our state. The North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force has lined up nationally recognized speakers from Boston, Atlanta, New York to teach us how to prevent human trafficking by reducing the demand. And we have homegrown experts who have been active in anti-human trafficking movement here in North Carolina for decades. We've been invited here to learn, of course, but our hope and expectation is that we will take away new information and take it back to the General Assembly, back to our law enforcement agencies, back to our nonprofits, and to the judicial system, your educational institution, and service providers, and institute change in our communities. Come on, y'all, put your hands together for that. Wake you up this morning. You're in this room because you have the power and influence to move North Carolina from a state that pulls exploited people out of the river to a state that stops exploiting from those people into rivers, stop putting them in the rivers. By working together, we can reduce demand for the purchase of sex and for exploited labor. Over the next 2 days, we're going to learn how together. We're honored that a number of elected officials are planning to be with us today. We have members of the General Assembly and their staff, elected district attorneys and their staff, elected sheriffs and their staff, as well as other elected officials. Would you please stand, all of our elected officials? Could you please stand? They're not here? Well, let's go ahead and applaud them before they get here. Come on, for all of our elected officials, all right? We're especially grateful for our conference sponsor, Goodwill of Eastern North Carolina. Come on, put your hands together for Goodwill. Yeah, I'm gonna keep y'all awake this morning, so we thank you, Goodwill, for being here and sponsoring this. Goodwill Industries of North Carolina transform lives through opportunities. For 60 years, they've been doing this and have empowered individual families and communities through employment, education, life enrichment opportunities, a leader in innovation solutions. Goodwill has served 51 counties and operates 42 employment programs, program centers throughout the Triangle, Sand Hills, and Eastern North Carolina. Come on, y'all, put your hands together for that. Amen. As a 2024 Nonprofit of the Year Award winner, Goodwill is committed to addressing relevant issues that impact local communities. To learn about Goodwill, you can visit www.gienc.org. That's gienc.org. A couple of housekeeping items. Please turn your phones off or to vibrate. If you need assistance at any time, please ask one of our volunteers who are wearing ribbons. They have the black ribbons up under their name tags. You can easily identify them. On your conference program is a QR code that will take you to the conference website, which contains speakers and their bios. Finally, we need to acknowledge that human trafficking is a sensitive topic. It's something very sensitive. And if you find that you cannot handle this topic and you find issues with it, take care of yourselves and step outside of the room if this topic begins to move you in a way that you need to take care of yourself, okay? So let's make sure we do that, all right? And now we're going to meet the leadership that planned this conference for you, the North Carolina Demand Reduction Leadership Team. Let's get them. It's Jim Duncan, Ricky Houston, Brent Journey, who could not be here today, Nikki Miller, Scott Sally, and Pam Strickland. Thank you, team. Thank you so much. Now, Ricky Houston is going to briefly tell us more about the task force. If y'all would put your hands together for Ricky Houston.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you this morning and to just talk about a little bit about the Human Trafficking Demand Reduction Task Force. And the reason it was created was to communicate the need and develop potential solutions for demand reduction strategy here in North Carolina. So let's talk about demand. Too often we don't talk about what demand is. So human trafficking operates like a business with a supply and a demand. The victims are objectified. When we think about objectification, Tony Porter, our keynote speaker, will talk about objectification a little bit later. But the victims are objectified and considered the supply by traffickers. And the buyers create the demand. Let me say that again, the buyers create the demand. The traffickers are only the middlemen. So without buyers, you would have no victims. No buyers, no business. The anti-trafficking movement is starting to realize these buyers have to be dealt with, or should I say also educated, if there's going to be any hope to end trafficking, which is what survivors have been saying for years. So the mission for our task force, I remember some years ago, a song used to come on television and say, I like calling North Carolina home. And so when we talk about this as being home, we have to really take care of home. So the mission of the task force is to create and execute a comprehensive plan to reduce demand for services of exploited persons. The vision of the task force is a state which there is no demand for exploited persons. Our goal is to launch an effective demand reduction programs to address both labor and sex trafficking based on available evidence and best practices. As I stated, the mission of the task force is to create and execute a comprehensive plan. To reach that goal, the task force developed several teams. Next, we will hear from the leaders of those teams, starting with law enforcement engagement. Hadia?
Good morning, friends. My name is Hadia Colleton, and I was the law enforcement engagement team leader. As you see, former police officer. To all of my law enforcement room, former enough to still have a valid opinion. Just throwing that out there. So the law enforcement engagement team has been working diligently on training officers on the importance of supply and demand across the state. Just recently, we held a training in Raleigh, which consisted of 29 students from varying agencies who were all interested in understanding the supply and demand side of human trafficking. Students learned skills that they could immediately utilize at their respective agencies. Some of the skills used were the program Spotlight, which is a computer program that identifies sex ads and compiles them into one system that law enforcement can access. We also utilize a link system that connects law enforcement agencies across the nation, including the U.S. military in some instances, which share valuable information that pertains to LEO, such as license plates, traffic stops, personal inquiries, names, birth dates, etc. So just about anything that a law enforcement officer would look to find about someone, Links probably has it. For an example, I used Links. All I had on the case one time was HHH for a license plate, a Honda Pilot, and I had that man cited and ticketed in 9 minutes. So it works. Presently, we are presently asking law enforcement to report back with the success stories of how this specialized training was used at each agency for investigations into recovered victims. For example, Rowan County identified a trafficking victim in another county, and the victim was trafficked in their county. The victim was recovered and trafficker was arrested. We are also seeking LEO and civilian personnel to join and expand our committee with the hopes of representation across the state. And lastly, for our future, in the future we look forward to larger training opportunities such as these and the possibility of training and working alongside other law enforcement officers. Believe it or not, law enforcement, we love y'all. We know we need y'all. All right, there's that. We also look forward to a centralized link that allows for the dissemination of training dates and other valuable tools. As we all know, and I speak to law enforcement because, like I said, formal enough to where my opinion still counts, there's a lot of information out there that we all don't know equally. So we're trying to work together to see if we can get that information compiled so that we all know what's going on at the same time. We are looking for up-to-date, accessible information regarding trafficking-related prosecutions. and victim resources that can be utilized across the state. Because as you know, working in this field, resources mean absolutely nothing if we can't all access them equally and all have the opportunity to use them to better our communities. Thank you all.
Okay, so I am not Bryn. I'm Nikki. You're stuck with me because Bryn couldn't make it. But I'm going to speak to you about the treatment team. So just to explain a little bit about what the treatment team of the task force does, some individuals who purchase sex simply need education to realize that what they're doing is harming others. But then still others are struggling with compulsive, unwanted sexual behaviors or some type of pathology, and they need treatment. So this treatment team, our goal is to identify, I'm going to read this here, identify best practices in identifying, assessing, and treating those who struggle with compulsive, unwanted sexual behaviors or other pathologies. So we want to see what are the best practices. There's not been a lot of research done on the best way to treat these type of compulsive buyers, but we're working on it. So this team might look to answer questions, first of all, like, let's see, can compulsive buyers benefit from the same proven methods that have helped individuals that are classified as sex offenders? So can we treat them the same? Another question is, how do we assess who needs education versus who needs treatment? The treatment team recently developed training for mental health specialists, and we are also working to assist the curricula team in creating a buyer education program that can hopefully be used across the state. So that's the treatment team.
I'm not Kara. Kara's going to be our new chairperson for this committee for labor trafficking or labor servitude. Let me start. My name is Scott Sell. I am one of the leaders on this pack of wolves, and we're trying to educate and make people aware of what's happening in our state. So if you don't like it, I'm part of the fault. But anyway, I hope you'll take a lot of information back home with you today. But with labor this afternoon, we're going to do an hour-and-a-half presentation on labor. My piece, my credentials are minimal. I come from boots on the ground, and I'm a former police officer, and I just want to throw the disclaimer in that sometimes my language is not appropriate. Just the way it is. I don't work for anybody. I'm retired, so I have no one really to answer except. But I do want to add that if you have a committee that you have an interest in, we're going to be meeting in the lunchroom. We have special tables, questions, whatever you want to have. We really need your help. So just think about it, and that will come out again. But labor servitude, just the one thing I will share with you is that through my observations, my experience, it's the children of people who are trapped in labor servitude. And we'll explain that later this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Hey, I'm Melinda Sampson, Chief Operating Officer of NC Stop Human Trafficking. I'm the team leader of the communication team. And just to let you know why we exist, we're trying to tell the story of what a reality that doesn't have human trafficking or exploitation. So that's a big hurdle to get to, right? Because it's so prevalent here in North Carolina. So our communication team is basically designed to tell the story of what prevention means and what it looks like, and also to really get people to wrap their mind around what demand is and how human trafficking is a business. It's an illicit business, it's an illegitimate business, but a business nonetheless. So when people can wrap their mind around that, that's when we can have incredible primary prevention programs and reach the goal of not having exploited people in the state. With that being said, the communication team has a website, well, helped develop the website. We created our social medias, a Facebook at NC Demand Reduction Task Force and Instagram at NC Demand Reduction Task Force. We have a few graphics that are up, and we hope in the future to develop a awareness program that really speaks to our target demographic of boys, because that's where the demand lies when we're talking about sex trafficking. And hopefully, once the labor trafficking team is solidified, we'll go into exploited people for labor. So with that, please visit Vince at the table at lunchtime, because anybody who wants to tell a story and be creative, because we are kind of the art side of the messaging, you let me know. It's tough, but it's necessary. Though communications oftentimes isn't seen as necessary, it absolutely is. Thank you.
My name is John Van Arnhem, and I chair the Pornography Prevention Committee team. And when we're talking about demand reduction, our young people watching internet pornography beginning at the age of 11 is the absolute mouth of the river. That is where it begins. And when Melinda spoke about how we have to look out for the men, our young boys watch this content at about age 11. And if they go through high school, they may see as many as 10,000 pornography videos. They get to college and realize that the only way that they can actually get what they think that they deserve or that they are entitled to is to pay for it. And so we are grooming an entire generation of predators by not having this conversation with them. Now, it's an honor to be on this task force and work with so many great people that understand how truly important this element is. I'm going to be sitting out at that table. We don't have anybody else but me on the Pornography Prevention Committee team, and I asked a lot of people, and they said it wasn't the chairperson. Dang, that was. I'd like to just take a moment and try that again. So we don't have anybody on the Pornography Prevention Committee team, and I asked a lot, and they said that it was not the chairperson. Thank you very much. We will be sitting out there at that table. I understand that it is not dinner table conversation to talk about young children viewing this content, but it is critical to reducing the demand here in the state of North Carolina. Thank you.
Hey folks, I'm here to talk about one of our 8 teams, the curricular team. We do not have a leader for the curricular team right now, but I'm sure that we will have before this conference is over because it's so important. I did want to mention that it takes a team effort for everyone. It's time for us to pull our fences down and start working together. A good example of that would be the curricular team is preparing educational slides that they can share with all the different anti-trafficking organizations we have in North Carolina, so we can all come together and work together closer. Buying our education curriculum. We've been working on that, and we've been working with not only in our area, but around the world on different John schools, so we have information pertaining to that. Middle and high school, as you know, they're required every other year to have 2 hours of human trafficking training in North Carolina. And what we want to do is be able to add some demand reduction to that right now. That's not in their curriculum. We want to try to put that in there. Trying to work with other groups. There are so many other organizations and businesses that we need to knock on their door and work with them and get them involved in this demand reduction. That's a big thing we do in our area in Rowan County with Project Light. Law enforcement, how important is it to work with law enforcement? We must, and we want to. And pornography, the dangers of pornography, and how pornography and demand reduction go together, as John mentioned. So we need more volunteers. I'm going to be at that table with John and everybody else, and looking forward to meeting you more in person. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Pam Strickland. I'm the founder of North Carolina Stop Human Trafficking and one of the co-founders of the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. And I just want to add my welcome. I'm just so glad to see all of you here. Currently, we do not have a leader for our legislative and policy team. And I've been a member of that team since we created it, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. One of the main tasks, of course, of that team is to create a legislative agenda. And to do that, what we do is we look at our current statutes and see where things could be improved upon. Now, we have a long list, but I'm only going to mention a couple of things that are kind of our priorities. So the first is something that you're going to hear more about later on in panels, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot, and that is our solicitation of prostitution statute here in North Carolina. Some of you may be aware that in North Carolina, like almost everywhere else in the country, the purchase of sex is a misdemeanor. And so, of course, that is part of the reason that it's not taken very seriously by the public, by law enforcement, by the court system. It's just not a charge that's really sought after. Another problem with our particular statute in North Carolina, though, is that so one of the things that our Demand Reduction Task Force wanted to do right off the bat is, gosh, how many people are getting charged for buying sex in North Carolina? I mean, that would be a kind of a good place to start some of the things we want to talk about. Well, so we go and we look at this statute, and the sex buyer and the person being sold are both charged under this statute. So that when you go to the administrative office of the courts and you look at the records to see, okay, how many people were charged under the statute, first of all, that number is incredibly low. It's not being charged. And we can't tell from that very low number how many of them were buying sex and how many of them are the person being sold, the person that we refer to as victims here. So, that whole statute just needs to be rewritten so that those charges are separated out. And that sort of brings me to another fairly hot legislative topic, I guess, across the country, is should we be charging those folks? Should we be charging people who are being sold for sex? And there's quite a bit of debate about that in the country. The position of a lot of people in the anti-trafficking field is that no, we shouldn't be charging the people that are being sold. We should instead offer them services, offer them an exit ramp to get out of this situation and to build a new life and help restore them to the person they were created to be. And so a model that exemplifies that idea is called the Nordic model. It's also called the equality model. So it's got a couple of other names that you might have heard. And basically the concept of that model is that, as one of my colleagues mentioned, I apologize, I don't remember which. So we've got the supply, demand, and we've got the middleman. So in the Nordic model, the buyer would be charged, the supplier, the trafficker, would be charged, but the person being sold, the victim, would not be charged. And so that's a model that has been successfully implemented in some other countries, greatly reduced the amount of prostitution and the amount of sex trafficking in those countries. So that's a big leap. That would be a big ask, but that is where we would like to go. That is the end goal. So that's a little bit about legislation. I will be sitting at the table at lunch to talk with you about that. If there are people here who are interested in policy and legislation, come talk to me and we can talk about how we can make some progress on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, the last team we're going to tell you about. So when Ricky said that we wanted to make a comprehensive plan, now you got it, kind of got an idea that all these teams work together to make that comprehensive plan. We're looking at it from all directions. So built on all the teams are built on data. We want everything that we do to be evidence-based. Otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels, taking a shot in the dark. So we wish there was more data on human trafficking, but we're working with that. So let's see, the leaders, like I mentioned, the leadership team, the Demand Reduction Task Force, we strive to base all our programs on data. The data team is tasked with retrieving data that will inform the strategies for all the other teams. So some things they look at are arrest numbers, prosecutions, convictions. Are people getting arrested but not prosecuted? Are they getting arrested and then for one charge and then actually convicted of something different? So we want to look at all that and find out, okay, what's going on in North Carolina. And then we're also looking at the number of ads for sex that are available online in North Carolina to see how big is the problem. The data team also reviews research that helps the task force learn about the effectiveness of various demand reduction approaches, or to learn about the characteristics or demographics of the buyers. So basically, we're looking to see what Michael Shively's putting out next. So that is the data team. If you guys are interested, Jim Duncan will be sitting at that table. We are also looking for a leader for that team. The leader had to step down, but it is a very important team. So if you are minded with the statistics and research, if you like that kind of thing, please come and see Jim at lunch. Thanks.
All right. So I want to thank all of those teams for pioneering this effort in North Carolina. Can we put our hands together one more time for these teams and the work that they're doing? It's very hard work, but it's very necessary work that we take care of our great state of North Carolina. So these teams, as you heard, they'll be meeting in the lunchroom next door during lunchtime. Okay, if you'd like to find out more about certain teams, please join them at these tables. Their tables will have notes on them. You'll know who they are as you go to those tables. And so we also want you to, there will be signs at the tables, and you can also learn more about the North Carolina Demand. You scared me, man. He warned me already, but still shook me up and threw me off my place. You can also learn more about the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force by visiting the website or following them on social media. Their website address is northcarolinademandreduction.com. That's northcarolinademandreduction.com. So before we get started with the speakers, I want to make sure that you notice the QR code that you have on your conference programs. If you scan that code, it will bring up the conference website, which contains the speakers' bios, that you can actually find out more about the speakers. Now, at this time, I want to ask Mr. Ricky Houston if he would come back and introduce our next speaker.